Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for coming. This morning we want to address a critical issue, but I want to pause, and I'm sure my fellow members of our caucus, Jenica Atwin of Fredericton and Paul Manley from Nanaimo Ladysmith, and I want to acknowledge that a lot of Canadians right now and a lot of our media are rightfully absorbed in the story of the question of COVID-19, how dangerous it might be, what precautions we take as individuals. We certainly understand that this is a time of uncertainty for Canadians. Nous sommes absolument préoccupés aussi par la situation de COVID-19 et les questions de santé publique. Et pour tout le monde, nous sommes disponibles pour les renseignements, pour les réponses, si vous voulez. We are very much concerned as well about COVID-19, but the other issues that preoccupy this country don't go away, particularly the climate crisis, which is upon us, and which certainly is a much larger public health threat than COVID-19. It happens to be a slower moving one, but our opportunities to avoid the tipping points that will lead to potentially the loss of human civilization and the world as we know it, these are not hyperbolic words, these are scientifically correct, is measured now, our opportunities to avoid that are measured in months and not years. So it is concerning that as Canadians who recognize the urgency of the climate crisis organize and take steps to demand that governments act, conservative politicians in this country are ramping up the rhetoric of polarization against climate activists and Canadians of all walks of life who have decided to stand up, whether in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en or in climate-related events such as those organized by civil society and groups like Extinction Rebellion. Specifically, I was alarmed in the House of Commons on February 26 when I heard Andrew Scheer say, and I'll quote, "These are radical groups like Extinction Rebellion, an organization that has been listed as a terrorist organization in the United Kingdom." Et je vais le répéter en français et je cite parce que Andrew Scheer a dit dans la Chambre des communes, dans les périodes de questions, et je cite, "Il s'agit de groupes radicaux comme Extinction Rebellion, un groupe qui a été répertorié comme organisation terroriste au Royaume-Uni." Ce n'est pas vrai. It is not true at all that Extinction Rebellion has been listed as a terrorist organization anywhere. In fact, because of precautions in the UK, and their security committees have reported to Parliament that they did an assessment of Extinction Rebellion and concluded that it was not in any way a terrorist risk. It is a group dedicated to non-violent civil disobedience in order to pursue climate justice and climate action. It does create difficulties in society when the routes that citizens choose involve blocking traffic and so on, but to conflate nonviolent civil disobedience with criminal activity and terrorist activity, which engages a whole different level of our laws. Our anti-terrorist laws generally suspend civil liberties for people who are charged with terrorism. And public attitudes change when elected leaders attack groups that are nonviolent and call them terrorists. Mr. Scheer should be ashamed, and so should Premier Jason Kenney, who has attacked a wide range of groups with a number of words from left, urban, radical, green, foreign funded. And for a commentary on that type of polarization, I turn the microphone to Paul Manley. Je vais donner la parole à Paul Manley, député de Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you. Yes, so the idea that we have foreign-funded radicals in this country who are involved in the debate over the oil industry is true. I would say that some of these foreign multinational corporations are very radical in their viewpoints and in the propaganda that they are feeding us. We just had an expose earlier on last week about how the information about LNG displacing coal and the greenhouse gases from coal was completely false information. The person that put this forward works for Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, and they left out the information about the end-to-end greenhouse gas emissions from fracked gas. And so the fracking process releases methane. Many of the wells are leaking. It leaks in the transmission process. It leaks all down the line. And Los Angeles and New York have identified that natural gas is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions in those cities, and in districts in California, they're banning the installation of natural gas in new buildings and in neighborhoods. And in fact, fracked gas, natural gas, methane is 85 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2, and so it is a climate killer. And that's in the first 15 years when it's released, it's 85 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. So this idea that foreign-funded radicals are, distorting the debate on oil and gas in this country is ridiculous, because it is the foreign corporations who have been dictating, their policies and their interests to our government. And you can see that in the LNG Canada project. And LNG Canada is a misnomer. It's 5 foreign multinationals: Royal Dutch Shell, Mitsubishi, Petronas, which is a Malaysian state-owned corporation, Korean Gas, which is a state-owned corporation, and PetroChina, which is a state-owned corporation. And they have managed to get $5.4 billion in tax breaks from the British Columbia government, $275 million from the federal government. They are getting power at a rate that BC ratepayers would love to have, extremely low rates for paying for hydroelectricity from the Site C Dam, which is again being subsidized to the tune of $12 billion by ratepayers in British Columbia, to power the fracking fields in northeastern BC and to power the LNG facility. So these foreign multinationals have influenced our governments in extraordinary ways to give them huge tax breaks. They've also influenced the government to give them royalty breaks. So the idea that we're going to, pay for our schools and hospitals and everything else by fracking in this country, or by expanding the oil sands in this country, is ridiculous. We give our resources away at very low royalty rates compared to other jurisdictions like Norway, which charges 24%. Here our average is around 1%. So we're giving the resource away. In British Columbia, 10 years ago, the royalties from natural gas were $1.2 billion per year. Last year it was $108 million, and that's despite a 70% increase in production. And so we're seeing production go up, royalty rates go down, and that's because they get a royalty credit for horizontal fracking, which is how all fracking is done these days. And there's a $2.4 billion credit sitting on the accounts for British Columbia for these royalty credits for horizontal fracking. So these foreign multinationals, this foreign influence in our oil and gas sector, have had a huge influence on government and continue to have a huge influence on government. The amount of money that comes in from organizations like Tides Canada is minuscule, and they would love to have the kind of resources that pour in from these other corporations. I think it was $250 million was identified that they've poured into their propaganda campaigns against climate change. And so citizens need to fight back. I've been an environmentalist for decades, and I've never seen my check. I'd like to get my check, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague from Fredericton, Jenica Atwin.
Thank you, Paul. I thought the same thing. I've been on many protest lines, and I was never paid by foreign-funded organizations. So, this is what we're here to do today, is to debunk some of these myths and, some of the untruths that have been spoken on the floor of the House of Commons, which is quite frankly unacceptable. I want to address the cynical, divisive language that is being used to polarize Canadians. As elected officials, it's our job to bring the concerns of constituents to the House of Commons to debate matters of significance to Canadians. The goal of this process is to find unifying threads that define a shared vision for politics that resonates across the nation. Je me réfère à des enjeux comme les programmes nationaux d'assurance médicaments, un projet à l'échelle nationale qui améliorerait grandement la qualité de vie des Canadiennes et des Canadiens de toutes les sphères de la société. Unfortunately, there are politicians trying to capitalize on division. I couldn't believe it when Mr. Scheer asked the Prime Minister to choose between energy workers and activists. What a ridiculous thing to say. Many in his caucus talk about choosing between the economy and the environment. The problem with this sort of dichotomy politics is that it pits Canadians against one another, driving further division, something we don't need right now. Dichotomy politics also is founded on lies. The choice is not between workers and proponents for climate change. Toutes les approches pour lutter contre les changements climatiques doivent être efficaces et fonctionner par les gens qui habitent et travaillent ici, chez nous au Canada. The irony is that fighting climate change will leave our nation vulnerable to the economic throes of the global decoupling from fossil fuels that is imminent. We need to destroy the dichotomy that creeps into our politics and remember what it is that has brought us to the People's House. Thank you very much.
Merci tout le monde. Je suis tellement fière de mes collègues, les deux députés, Jenica Atwin de Fredericton, puis Paul Manley de Nanaimo Ladysmith. Nous sommes, nous trois, et aussi dans le Parti vert du Canada, absolument engagés pour agir contre l'urgence climatique. Le temps presse, mais ce n'est pas trop tard. Mais les politiques, comme Jenica a dit, de division, de polarisation, sont contre nos intérêts du Canada comme un peuple, comme un pays. Nous sommes engagés pour un meilleur avenir avec une énergie propre, avec une économie verte. And so we will be continually pressing these points. But as someone who was arrested in March of 2018 protesting the Kinder Morgan pipeline, I would do it again. That pipeline should never be built. And now that the people of Canada own it, it's only worse. We have a Crown Corporation with billions of our dollars to be wasted building a pipeline to deliver bitumen with no markets anywhere in a time of climate emergency. We really do need to pull our heads out of the oil sands and start addressing a sustainable future. Thank you very much.